Welcome back to the channel. This is your boy Rich Latta here, back with another video. Today we're going to be looking at something from the most recent Elle Duncan podcast. She was talking about Christie Sides being fired from the Indiana Fever, Stephanie White, and kind of like, just various comments on the situation. And we're going to break down her comments here.
This ad nauseum, right? There's only 12 teams right now,
Yeah.
and 8 of those teams make the postseason. So it stands to reason that, even if you finish 8th, it wasn't a great season by your estimation. But half the coaches in the WNBA, over half, 7 coaches in the WNBA fired this year, including the latest, Christie Sides, who was tasked with taking a rookie class and getting them back to the postseason for the first time since 2016. And
We'll stop it right there. So let's break that down. So whoever said that that's what Christie Sides was tasked with, was anyone looking at the Indiana Fever as a playoff team before the season? Was anyone looking at this as anything other than another step along the journey before, the team started overachieving? I don't believe so. The job itself with the Indiana Fever changed on the fly. And I think it's okay to admit that. You have to be flexible on these things. It's not just the job was to get to the playoffs. No, that wasn't the job. The job was to try to coach the team to the best of your ability, and they ended up in the playoffs.
and she did that and was still fired. And then Steph White, who said, I'll hold your first round exit and I'll take you all the way, a game away from the finals. And I'll also get fired after 2 years, which was wild to me because if you ask people around the league, people would tell you that Steph White's amongst the best coaches.
Okay. I think Elle Duncan might just be fundamentally misinformed on what happened with Stephanie White in the Connecticut Sun. There was a public story about, a family situation, right? In the background of that, Stephanie White was meeting with the organization because of reporting that corroborates this about her future with the organization. And when it was announced, they didn't announce that they're firing her. They did a big thank you for her on social media. In my estimation, what happened was, White went to the organization, was like, yo, we got one more year left on the deal. I don't necessarily want to be here anymore. You might be about to blow it up. Like, as far as all their free agency, there's a lot of questions going on with the Connecticut Sun right now. This isn't going to be the same team going forward. So I have another offer. Can we work together, find some language in the contract which will present it to the public as a parts ways rather than a fired? And from there, I think the Connecticut Sun worked with Stephanie White, who led them for 2 years to a winning record, a very, very good record. They were like, you know what? We appreciate what you did for us. We're going to facilitate you getting you home where you want to be. That's what I think happened. I don't think Elle Duncan is cognizant of this at all. So
Now, I don't know if this is like significant timing. The rumors are linking her to go to Indiana. I'm seeing stories pop up. It's like every time Steph White's ever spoken to Caitlin Clark through history, they're trying to connect these dots, but it's hard out here.
I mean, all the dots ended up being right now that Stephanie White has been announced as the new coach. So maybe she should take back the little,
For these coaches in the W. And the worst part, Gary, is like there's just a complete lack of patience. I mean, we saw Teresa Witherspoon after 1 year, but these coaches have had 2 years. You can't really implement any real change in 2 years. And if you're Steph White, like you got your team. Your team was for a large part of the season the number 1 team, or sitting in the one position, and they get within a game of the finals, and she gets let go. And I don't know. It's wild.
Okay, I think that's a decent point, but I feel like there were no assurances that that same team is going to be brought back. We saw Alyssa Thomas talking about being a businesswoman and having to go to the table. We know Dewana Bonner is also a free agent. Dejanay Carrington is up to be re-signed. It looks like they may be building the team around her going forward. And if Carrington's going to end up as your number 1 player, possibly, if Thomas doesn't end up going somewhere else or something like that. She's been there her whole career. This is a potential rebuild. Coaches normally jump at times like these. Like when the Boston Celtics were coming out of the Big Three era, Doc Rivers didn't stick around like, you know what, I'm just going to build it all back up with Brad Stevens. No, it was time for him to go too. And he jumped somewhere that was a potential contender at the time, like the Los Angeles Clippers. So hopefully it goes a little bit better for the Fever than it did for the Clippers. But yeah, like I don't understand that and what she meant there.
But do you think about the parity and the similarities that we've seen in other leagues? And I think as a net positive or as a net total, I think it is a sign that the WNBA is expediting their competitive process. In that, I mean, remember George Karl, Monty Williams, Dwayne Casey, all of those coaches in the NBA were fired after being named coach of the year, right? And being taking their NBA franchises to the playoffs and deep into the playoffs. So I think this is maybe an indication of WNBA teams, franchises, ownership groups expecting more, expecting better. It is definitely stark when you think about, okay, 7 coaches. Well, on Black Monday in the NFL, we see 7 coaches get fired. We see 7 vacancies. Oh, there's 32 teams.
Yeah,
this is 60%
58% of the league. That's wild.
Which I think there's a reason, and I think some of that has to do with the CBA, that these teams are basically cleaning out these front offices. Potentially they might not have to pay people. And then also the league itself, people are buying in the league right now. Like we just heard the story about Patrick Mahomes possibly trying to get an expansion team in Kansas City. So with more money coming into the teams or into the ownership, they're going to want better candidates than Teresa Weatherspoon, who seemingly played through Angel Reese as her number 1 option for far longer than anybody would ever do. Like they want higher IQ, higher level basketball minds, and that's why I think this turnover is happening.
And everybody knows in every sport, it's like a carousel. It's very cyclical that a coach will get fired, not the right fit in X market, but they will be hired and they will be the right fit or at least a temporary fit in Y market. And maybe, Elle, that's what we're going to start seeing in the WNBA. The Christie Sides thing is the one that really kind of sideswiped me because the Fever were held to zero expectation, nearly a decade without making it to the playoffs. They exceed expectations.
Wait a second. She just said the expectation before this was to get the Fever to the playoffs. Now, my man is saying something a little different here. So let's see how this, goes.
Expectations, and a lot of that has to be coaching because your team is so young and so unfamiliar with one another. That one was strange. I don't think that she's going to be out of a job very long, but I don't know.
She should get another look somewhere, either as a coach that can come in to start a rebuild again, or a high-level assistant with like a contending team.
So what this can be indicative of other than a sign that WNBA teams and franchises expect better competition, which I think is positive for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a part of that being, the case. I think too, like when you sort of think about moving on from someone, especially 2 years into their tenure, who by all intents and purposes did what the goal or the mission of the season was to do. I'll take someone like a Steph White, 2 years in Connecticut, lost in the semifinals both years. You're firing her if you're thinking, okay, the way that the owners or team has viewed this team has changed, right? Mm-hmm. Like, well, we view that this team should have been a finals team. They've got a lot of free agents on Connecticut. Maybe they're sort of reading the tea leaves and going like, you had your opportunity and you didn't take advantage of it, and now we're going.
I think she's just wrong about all this. So, and I already kind of talked about why, so we'll just keep going.
Move on. Another reason to fire a coach is because the pool of someone else is gross, right? Like the more available talent. Now you have to wonder with all the increased intention, with the new media rights deal, with the fact that, the W is having, more spotlight than it ever has before, that they're thinking there's opportunity to go get bigger names or better coaches to come. Carolyn Peck was on a panel at the summit this past week in Ojai, and she brought up something really interesting when she sort of talked about the evolution of the W. Of course, Carolyn Peck was the first Black woman to win a national championship as a head coach at Purdue, and the W was a GM, like all these things. And she talked about how one of the glaring differences was, apart from the play of the girls, was the coaching struggles. And it was that, you're going and you're trying to get all of these coaches that have never coached at a professional level, that were a little bit in over their heads, and didn't really know what to do, how to coach professional women. And they were trying to coach with this sort of college approach, this college style.
Yeah. Well, Christie Sides had never been a head coach anywhere before she got the Fever job. You wouldn't have to worry about that with Stephanie White. She has already been a head coach of the Indiana Fever before, and she's coming from a winning situation in, Connecticut, and she has history in the region, and she has high level support in the franchise. This is almost akin to like a prodigal child returning home to lead the team back. So a lot of this stuff doesn't apply for Stephanie White, and then other things for Stephanie White make her just the perfect person to take over this team. And any hand wringing about it seems like it's kind of misguided.
And that what she's seen change the most is just how much better the talent pool has gotten of coaches, how much more money they're making. She brought up Becky Hammond getting that $1 million contract, highest paid coach in the W. At the time, I believe that is still such. And so you wonder if that's a part of it as well, right? It's like, you know what? We're going to have better options, more options, people that we think that we can take that. And then, I think thirdly, maybe the question is, does the job itself change a little bit, again, based on what the players look like now?
Yes, the job is changing. The job is changing because of the hire. So to be fair, this was recorded before Stephanie White was announced as the new coach. But when you fire Christie Sides, there's only one real reason. It's because you expect this team to be on an accelerated path if you follow the game for any amount of time. And allegedly Elle Duncan has. Dude, what do y'all think? Let me know.
What the expectations are. So to me, on its head, it's like inexplicable. Some of these, like some of them you could understand, culture thing, you don't like the way the culture is going, you want to change it up. But if the goal of every season is to start out, if you look at Indiana in particular, to make the postseason after
that wasn't the goal. Like
not making the postseason since 2016. And you also have to think about the development for the players. I mean, this is now another coach that Caitlin Clark, I immediately joked and was like, Lisa Bluter is going to come out of retirement. Caitlin Clark, Iowa coach, and she's going to go there.
She's right down the street. I mean, she's pulling up to all the games anyway.
She right there, you know what I mean? Ain't nothing to just slide her a little clipboard. But again, you're talking about a team that really started to catch fire towards the end of last year. And now they're going to go through another coaching change. Yeah. And, for Aaliyah Boston, that's going to be, her second coaching change. This will be the same thing for Caitlin Clark. So,
because a great player has never survived a coaching change before. A great player has never had to deal with any type of instability, like of who's coaching for this. Stop the cap. This stuff happens, especially when a better coach is coming in to replace them. I think you can sacrifice the small hint in continuity between players and leadership for the overall mission and goal. It's either you were going to basically put a shock to the system and the development of your players now, and those players are going to respond, or they were going to keep trudging very slowly with Christie Sides.
You just wonder how much you're stunting their potential development or growth, or at least
that's absurd. Stunting them. How are you going to stunt the growth of a first all-team W player? How are you going to stunt the growth of Aaliyah Boston, who has made the All-Star team 2 times in a row in her first 2 years in the league? How are you going to stunt the growth of one of the best scorers in the league, Kelsey Mitchell? How are you going to do that? You have to be an idiot to stunt their growth. That's absurd.
Delaying it by bringing in a new regime, but I've got to believe that they've got some plan here. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to sprinkle just something real quick before we move on to the next topic. Is when you have Caitlin Clark on your team and everything runs through her franchise-wise in large part, obviously the WNBA's growth. I don't think Fever Brass make that change without Caitlin Clark signing off. So if she did sign off, or at least say, "Hey, do what you got to do," is that an indication of a little bit of trouble in said locker room, and that's why they let her? Listen, if Caitlin Clark was like that.
So you slipped that in there right there. Like, is there trouble in the locker room? So let's keep rolling.
The coach that I want to progress with, they don't make that change. I don't know, just in my estimation. Maybe they didn't even bring her into the fold or let her know, but just something to think about. Because
I think we in a way try to scapegoat players by saying things like that. We always put that at the feet of LeBron. Like, he had to have signed off on this. And certainly LeBron now probably has like some say, or at least.
I mean, he did mind the game with JJ Redick on a podcast for months and lay that out. Come on.
Just giving the heads up, like, these are the candidates. Do you have any thoughts? But I don't think that Caitlin Clark was it was one of those, I don't think it's Gladiator, right? Where he's like, does he live or does he die? I don't think it's
win the
like
crowd,
that.
win your freedom. Come on.
Right. I don't think it's anything like that. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, would I be surprised if Indiana went to her and we're thinking of making this change? And, this is obviously going to impact and affect you. And do you have thoughts about it? But I don't think it was one of those, if you want Christie, we'll keep her, but we want to fire. Are you good with that? I don't know that that's fair to say that, that there was an involvement in that way.
Okay, so that's the clip right there. Shout out to Elle Duncan and her co-host for putting that out there. I think some of the stuff they were a little, misguided on. Then some of the stuff, like the end part, I agree with. Like, I don't think this is a situation where they were like, we're getting rid of her, Caitlin. What do you think? Do you want to keep her? I think Caitlin was kind of on the same page with the organization. In the aftermath of Stephanie White being hired, all the players are celebrating on social media. No one said a word when Christie Sides, publicly at least, no one said a word to basically say they were upset. No one dropped a 700 character Twitter message like Angel Reese did when Teresa Weatherspoon was fired. That wasn't the case here. It was radio silence, celebrate the new coach. So what do you guys think about what Elle Duncan was saying? And what do you think about, the entire firing around Christie Sides? I think there are a lot of ways you can feel about it, but ultimately the Fever made the decision, and it seems like the players are in lockstep, and I think we got to readjust and reframe kind of what the expectations were going into the 2024 season, and then think about where they're going. Because if you come into this saying they were expected to make the playoffs, they weren't. Like, this is a team that blossomed throughout the season, and there was talent there, and we knew how good Caitlin Clark was, but what happened was slow growth and then showing signs, and it's like, oh, we actually have the foundation in place. We're here, but we got one thing we got to fix up, and that happened to be the coach. Anyway, my name is Rich Latta. Hope you enjoyed this video. It's One Lifetime with Rich Latta. Get a hat, get a shirt. Not wearing one right now, but if you want to help the channel out, you can just hit the like button or leave a comment as well. I'll holla at y'all. Peace. One Lifetime.